other news, Workers' Party chief Pritam Singh has been struck off the role of advocates and solicitors following his conviction last year for lying to a parliamentary committee. Mr. Singh, who is MP for Aljunied GRC, was a non-practising lawyer. The court of 3 judges ruled today that his offences involved dishonesty and warranted the profession's most serious sanction. Mr. Singh did not contest the decision, as Sherlyn Seah reports.
Following the court's decision, Mr. Singh declined to comment as he left the Supreme Court. The case was heard by the court of 3 judges, Singapore's highest disciplinary body for lawyers. During the hearing, the Law Society, represented by Senior Counsel Kevin Nabul, argued that Mr. Singh's convictions for giving false evidence to the Committee of Privileges involved dishonesty, with no exceptional circumstances to avoid being struck off. It said his positions as an MP and then leader of the opposition aggravated rather than detracted from, quote, the negative impact of his conduct. Mr. Singh's lawyer, Senior Counsel Chelva Raja, said that while Mr. Singh was disappointed with the outcome of both his trial and appeal, he continued to have deep respect for the independence, rigour and professionalism of Singapore's courts. He said Mr. Singh unreservedly accepted the outcomes and the consequences that followed. Mr. Raja also accepted that dishonesty was an essential element of the offences, adding that Mr. Singh recognised that the high legal threshold for avoiding being struck off had not been met. Chief Justice Sundaresh Menon said the court agreed with the Law Society's position and described Mr. Singh's concession as, quote, well advised. The hearing lasted less than 30 minutes, and in closing, the judges turned to the issue of legal costs after ordering Mr. Singh to be struck off. The Law Society had sought $6,000, but said it was willing to accept the $3,000 posed by the respondents' lawyers. Ultimately, Mr. Singh was ordered to pay $5,808, including disbursements.
Now here's a recap of the events that took place leading to today's hearing. Mr. Singh was convicted in February 2025 for lying to a parliamentary committee over the handling of former Workers' Party MP Raisa Khan. He was fined $14,000 for the 2 charges. He later appealed, but the High Court upheld his conviction in December last year. Mr. Singh was then removed as leader of the opposition in January, after Parliament voted that he was unsuitable to continue in the role. In March, the Law Society of Singapore said it had initiated disciplinary proceedings against Mr. Singh, as required under the Legal Profession Act following his conviction. At a Workers' Party special cadre conference in June, Mr. Singh returned as party chief, with cadres voting by a super majority to retain him as Secretary General. And for more analysis on the impact and implications of the ruling, we're joined by Associate Professor Eugene Tan from the SMU School of Law. Eugene, good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first of all, was this outcome expected after Mr. Singh's conviction was upheld in December?
The conviction was for giving false answers, false evidence, to the Committee of Privileges, willfully. And I think with that particular conviction, which speaks to dishonesty, today's outcome was not surprising. And so it didn't surprise us, that Mr. Singh also didn't contest, the Law Society's application. I think this is something that Mr. Singh pretty much expected, following the conviction and in his appeal being unsuccessful. And so I think this brings, the legal matter to a close.
And this hearing is the latest over the handling of course, former Workers' Party MP Raisa Khan's lie in Parliament. Do you think that this outcome puts the matter at rest, or are we likely to see further consequences?
No, I think with this particular matter in court today, it really brings an end. I don't see any more outstanding matters. Parliament has already dealt with the false evidence that Mr. Singh gave. Prime Minister Wong, had based on the debate in Parliament, determined that he was no longer suitable to continue as the leader of the opposition. The Workers' Party had also had their own disciplinary process, involving Mr. Singh. And so for an offence, that relates to dishonesty where a lawyer is concerned, today's proceedings were pretty much about that. I think there is the view, or at least the law requires, lawyers to be a fit and proper person, and that often entails, a lawyer acting honestly, right, with candor. This relates to both, matters relating to the legal profession, but it will also extend, to matters outside the profession. So I think in short, I think this brings an end, to the whole string of events and consequences, that flowed from then Workers' Party MP Raisa Khan's rise to Parliament in August 2021.
Now let's talk a bit about what it means to be struck off the role of advocates and solicitors. So we know that Mr. Singh was a non-practising lawyer. So does being struck off carry the same weight as if he were actively practising?
It does, in the sense that, being struck off the roles of advocate and solicitors means that he can no longer practice as a lawyer. In this case, because Mr. Singh was not practicing, I think the impact, would be less. But it still doesn't take away, the fundamental point, that he is now, struck off the roles. He cannot practice as a lawyer. And for him to be able to be reinstated as a lawyer, he would have to put in an application, to the court. And he probably can only do so after about a period of 5 years. Why 5 years? Because a lower penalty, for lawyers' misconduct would be suspension. And the longest period of suspension that the court can give a lawyer would be 5 years. And because being struck off the roll is a more severe penalty, I think it stands to reason that, a wait longer than 5 years would be necessary. But there's no guarantee, that an application for reinstatement, would be successful. The court will have to see whether, the person in question, has been rehabilitated, whether he or she has a clean record, since the being disbarred from practice. And so there is that uncertainty. So I think it would affect Mr. Singh more, in terms of his own professional career as a lawyer.
Now, being struck off the roll, how is that going to impact, if at all, any way, his political role? For example, leading the Workers' Party or even fulfilling parliamentary duties?
So there is no impact, right? So Mr. Singh can continue, as a member of Parliament. He certainly can continue, as the Secretary General of the Workers' Party. So there are no political implications that flow from him being struck off the rolls.
In this case, when we look at the longer term, how would it then affect the way political parties assess political candidates in future, especially if they have a legal background?
Angela, in my view, it shouldn't, right? It shouldn't, because I think the requirement to act with honesty, right, is something which is pretty much expected, not just of lawyers, but also of politicians. So I would be surprised, if political parties were to look at, people who are lawyers and wanting to enter politics, they look at them, in a different light. But I think, the lesson to be taken away, from this episode, would be very much about how, regardless of which profession you're in, I think the expectation, right, the demands of politics in Singapore, would be that the politician acts honestly. And so this impacts, on politicians, from different parties. It doesn't just apply, to the opposition. I think much would be even expected of politicians from the ruling party. So the long and short of it all is that I think this is an important lesson for all politicians, but I see it not having any bearing, on how political parties may go about recruiting and fielding their candidates. I don't see how it would affect, politicians who are lawyers, conducting political activities. If anything, I think it would emphasize, the need for honesty, for candor in their actions.
Eugene, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. That was Associate Professor Eugene Tan from the SMU School of Law.